She only wanted peace, a moment to claim what was hers, marked with a simple sign, private property. But before the ink had even dried, her quiet neighborhood turned into a battlefield. She didn't threaten anyone. She didn't break a rule. Yet within minutes, flashing lights bathed her lawn, and a stranger's voice accused her of trespassing on her own land. The people who should have protected her saw only the color of her skin, not the truth staring them in the face. And when the so-called HOA Karen called the cops, no one expected what would come next. How far would a neighbor go to keep someone like her in her place?
It had taken Maya years to find this place, a quiet corner of the suburbs where she could finally breathe after years of cramped apartments and uneasy stairs. Her little house sat at the edge of a tree-lined street, sunlight pooling across the fence she'd built herself. She loved that fence. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was a boundary she had earned. Most mornings, she'd water her garden with music humming softly from her porch, nodding politely to neighbors who rarely waved back. At first, she brushed off the subtle looks, the way conversations would hush when she walked by. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe. But tension has a way of creeping in slow, like cracks beneath paint. Small, silent, then suddenly, everywhere. When the HOA began sending letters about community standards, she didn't think it would lead to anything serious. Until one morning, a single note left on her mailbox changed that quiet normalcy forever.
The letter on Maya's mailbox looked official. Bold header, neatly typed paragraphs, and an icy tone pretending to be polite. It claimed her warning sign violated neighborhood appearance codes and demanded immediate removal. Beneath the formal language, she could feel the disdain bleeding through, the kind of authority that hides behind courtesy while twisting the knife. She took a deep breath, folded the paper, and placed it gently on her kitchen table. For a moment, she tried to laugh it off. A sign about safety? That couldn't possibly be a problem. But as the days passed, the small stares grew sharper. Neighbors she'd once nodded to turned their heads. Conversations stopped when she stepped outside. One afternoon, someone spray-painted the word trouble across her fence. She felt it like a punch, cold, personal. When she called to report it, the officer's tone was flat, detached. "Probably just kids," he said. But this didn't feel random. Kids didn't sound this organized. This was targeted, and deep down, she knew why. When she installed a sturdier sign, a simple no trespassing marker at the edge of her yard, the reaction was immediate. That evening, a white SUV slowed in front of her driveway. Behind the wheel sat Linda, the HOA president everyone jokingly called Karen. Only the humor had worn off months ago. Linda stared for a full minute before shaking her head in exaggerated disbelief and driving away. By the next morning, Maya's phone buzzed nonstop, emails from the HOA board, forward after forward of concerns. They accused her of being aggressive, of creating a hostile environment, all over a sign. Her pulse raced each time the doorbell rang, because by now she knew hostility didn't always sound loud. It often arrived in whispers and paperwork. And then came the knock that chilled her completely. Two uniformed officers stood on her porch, hands resting casually on their belts. One of them read from a notepad, asking if she'd been causing trouble near her own property line. Maya pointed past them to her yard, the same few feet of space she'd mowed, cleaned, and paid for. Her voice trembled, steady but disbelieving. "This is my land," she said quietly. The younger officer looked uncertain, glancing toward the street. That's when Linda appeared, arms crossed, smirking softly as if she'd rehearsed this moment. The officers conferred in hushed tones. Maya could hear fragments: trespass complaint, private property, HOA authority. Each word felt like a blow, twisting reality until she, the homeowner, was the intruder. Fear mingled with anger, but she stood rooted, breath sharp in her throat. And then, just when it seemed the humiliation had peaked, one officer gestured toward her sign. "You need to take that down." A demand, not a request. Linda folded her arms, satisfied. Maya turned toward her yard, her work, her space, and felt something settle deep and immovable inside her. No matter what they thought, she knew she wasn't leaving. The scene hung in silence, the air buzzing with tension, until one of the officers muttered something quietly into his radio. What happened next would flip everything. The air cracked with tension, every sound amplified, the rustle of leaves, the click of a police radio, Linda's steady breathing behind the officers. One of them stepped closer, the other watching Maya's hands as if she were armed, though all she held was a trembling copy of her property deed. Her voice struggled against the heavy stillness. "This is mine," she said simply. "My fence, my land." The officer didn't answer right away. Instead, he adjusted his belt, eyes darting to Linda, who stood with a folded complaint in her hand, rehearsed outrage painted across her face. Maya could see it now, the unspoken alliance of authority and prejudice, the practiced choreography of a black woman being told she didn't belong. Her heart pounded, not from guilt, but from the raw insult of it all. When the officer finally spoke, the words cut like glass. "Ma'am, we've had reports you were trespassing and acting threatening toward residents." The world tilted. "On my own property?" she whispered. Linda nodded, quick to step forward, voice rising with false confidence. "I told you she was trouble." Something inside Maya snapped, a quiet, contained fury that burned clean. Without shouting, she unfolded her papers and handed them to the younger officer. The name, the boundary lines, the signatures, everything was hers. For a moment, silence engulfed them. Then came the shift. Confusion flickered across one officer's face, then suspicion, only this time not directed at Maya. He turned toward Linda. "Ma'am, can I see your ID?" That single question rewired the entire scene. Linda's smirk faltered, the arrogance drained from her expression. The officer's voice joined in, low but firm. "You don't own this property, correct?" The quiet stretched impossibly long. And then, like a switch flipping, the power dynamic inverted. Linda's face flushed red as one officer gently guided her back, explaining she was the one violating property lines. Maya stood frozen, chest rising and falling as the realization sank in. After all the humiliation, someone had finally seen the truth. The lights still flashed across her lawn, but this time they illuminated something different. Justice breaking through the dark. When the patrol car finally rolled away, the street sank into an eerie stillness. The flashing lights faded, but the echo of them clung to Maya's skin. The memory of being doubted, confronted, exposed on her own lawn. Linda was gone now, escorted off the very property she'd tried to claim as her own victory ground. Neighbors peeked through blinds, curious but silent. No one dared meet Maya's eyes. Inside her home, she sat by the kitchen table, the same spot where the first letter had arrived. The papers still lay there, proof of ownership, proof of dignity, proof of something she should have never had to defend. That night, she watched the darkness outside her window, wondering how many other people were sitting just like this, in quiet houses that should have felt safe, replaying moments of disbelief. Later, she learned her story spread through the community, a caution and a revelation. Some saw it as gossip, others as a wake-up call. For Maya, it was both a personal victory and a heavy reminder. Justice could show up, but it came slow, uninvited, and only after she stood her ground. Weeks passed. She rebuilt her sign, steadier, stronger, right where it always belonged. It wasn't just a boundary marker anymore. It was a symbol, a small wooden line between the world that denied her and the one she was determined to protect. Racism doesn't always come crashing through doors. Sometimes it knocks politely, holding a clipboard, speaking in measured tones. But underneath its civility lies the same poison, the need to control, to diminish, to erase. Maya's story ended with light on her lawn and truth exposed. But beyond her fence, the question remains. How many fences, how many lives still need defending before equality feels like home?